And the next piece of evidence in this timeline is the deposition of Jimmy Miyoshi. A film history or film appreciation course in college, and had gone on to become a professional actor of sorts for the police, who plays only organized criminals. And he heard that my lawyer was trying to make some kind of a point. And perhaps he didn't want to assist him with this. And so this officer who studied film, who was a professional actor, said, "The Godfather? I'm not really a movie buff. Did that come out in the 70s? Now, if this officer hasn't seen The Godfather, he's probably the only person who hasn't. But you may remember in The Godfather, there's a description of the way that organized criminal groups get people to make agreements. You either give up your signature or you give up your life. When Jimmy Miyoshi was 20 years old, he was told he would either be giving an agreement for immunity or he'd be convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. He was told your friends are going away anyway. Your only choice is to save yourself. When Jimmy was first interrogated, he told the police that because of the questions they were asking him, which were loaded with details about what he might have to say in response, he told them, it's like you're trying to plant a scenario in my head. Over the years, Jimmy was interviewed again. Some of these interviews were on tape, and some of them weren't. In 2003, he was deposed. One of the last questions he was asked was, "Jimmy, nobody told you what to say, did they?" His answer was, "I believe you've been pretty careful not to tell me directly." I think it's pretty clear from that answer and from his statements in 1995 that Jimmy Miyoshi was being asked questions encouraging him what he ought to be saying. And when Jimmy said, "Not directly, you haven't told me directly what to say," that's one of the most important lines in the entire deposition. The jurors didn't make a note of it. And in deliberations, the jurors did not raise that when considering the credibility of Jimmy Miyoshi. There's one more specific piece of evidence that I want to talk about. I don't have time to discuss all the evidence I want to. I've chosen this particular piece of evidence because it's my opinion that it proves our innocence, and I don't understand how this evidence has been analyzed otherwise by the jury. This is the evidence of how many people were in the bedroom of T's father. Crime scene analysis included the fact that there were 2 shadows in the blood spatter in this room. And let me just say, this is not a pleasant thing to talk about. I think we all understand that when considering the evidence of the case, you have to talk about forensic evidence, and like I said, this is the evidence that proves that we're innocent. There's spatter in all directions in this room. There are 2 shadows in the spatter showing that 2 people were in the room. The significance of this is that when Atif and I are giving our supposedly true stories, what we say is there was only one person in that room. That was the evidence that was available to the police in 1995, and it wasn't until 2001 that it was discovered that the statements did not match the crime scene. This presented the state with a problem. The state was not about to make an argument that the confessions were false. The state was not about to make an argument that these kids are guilty. They're making the statements because they want to have evidence removed, but they're lying about the very evidence that they want to have removed, because that just wouldn't make any sense. That would be like arguing that somebody goes to a bank machine for the purpose of getting money and then deliberately types in the wrong PIN number. You just wouldn't do it. So during the examination of the crime scene analyst, the state asked Mr. Gardner, is it possible that one person could have caused both shadows? First they would stand on one side and cause one shadow, and then walk around to the other side and cause the other shadow. And I was there when this testimony was given. In my opinion, the witness was reluctant on this point. He said, essentially, he can't say that that's impossible. And so that was the state's theory. I would ask you to try using your own judgment on this. There's spatter in all directions. Everyone can see that. All directions. The theory that was offered is that the spatter only goes towards the attacker. I don't know why that would happen, but that was the theory. Not only is that contradicted by the plain evidence that it's going everywhere, but using your common sense, anybody who has used a hula hoop knows that they use the expression cast off spatter when something is going off a weapon. It does not travel towards the moving object. It goes away. Spatter would be, if anything, more in the opposite direction. And clearly, it's everywhere. And so in order to believe this theory, not only do you have to believe that all this spatter went everywhere except for that one spot. However improbable that is, not only do you have to believe that that happened, you have to believe that it happened twice. Because the theory then is that the person walked around to the other side and all spatter was going everywhere, and there's this second hole on the other side. And we've been found guilty. I've never heard what the explanation for that evidence is. The actual crime scene analysis, of course, included 3 people. That doesn't mean there's going to be 3 shadows, but there was evidence of a third person because, as he said, he couldn't explain it any other way because of evidence that was moved around. But like I say, I've never heard what the explanation is for 2 simultaneous blood shadows from the jury that convicted us, or from anybody that makes any sense. I don't have time to talk about the rest of the evidence. I would like to. However, based on the continuing representations of the state and the news media, it seems that the principal other piece of evidence against us is arrogance, our arrogant personalities. There's a tape recording of me in one of the scenarios talking about how I heard that some girl saw my picture in an article, paid me a compliment based on my picture, and there's a recording of me saying, "That just shows how stupid people are." And certainly that's arrogant. But you know, I can't imagine that any adult would listen to that and not realize right away that this kid was obviously flattered, that somebody was paying him a nice compliment, and then obviously confused about the weird implications of the fact that this person was obviously looking at a story about murder and not knowing what the person thinks, not knowing how to handle it, and quite predictably acting tough, acting callous, like he doesn't care. When newspaper stories first started to appear about us when I was 18, back in 1994, my stomach would go into knots whenever a story would come out. I would be inconsolable for the rest of the day. The way that I got over that was to become cynical, to act tough. And it's the same way I got over not being able to go to school, or work, or have public life. And this is all before an interesting and friendly stranger, a grown-up, an adult, invited me for a drink. A month later, I was swearing up and down that the only reason why I kept the note of his license plate was because, not because I wanted to tell the police, but because I just wanted to keep in touch with him. Whether you're a person or a tree, Mother Nature always has the same solution to something that hurts. The solution is to grow a callus. During jury selection in this case, the state was asking one of the jurors, what does she do when she hears conflicting stories? And this juror explained that she always goes to the source. She never takes somebody's word for it at first. She always goes to the source to find out what the true story is. And I'm paraphrasing, but I think this is a fair paraphrase. The state's response was, well, what do you do if you can't find out the truth? And that's the thing about this case, is that there's inherent doubt. And nonetheless, it's presented like a placebo. And I've been made a fool of by placebos myself. I'll give one good example. After Jimmy Miyoshi and I left Landis Hotel on July 26th, Jimmy was asking me, why didn't I think that they were undercover police officers? And I just knew that they weren't. And usually the way people form their beliefs is not based on reasons. It's just your beliefs. And when you know something, you know it. And it can be kind of difficult to explain why. And in the wrong situation, it can almost be annoying. So finally, trying to think of a reason, finally said, I know. He beat up a guy right in front of me. That's proof. And Jimmy said, did you actually see it? The truth is, the undercover police officer had told me, just look out the door for a second. Make sure no one's coming. I looked out the door, just as I was turning back, in my peripheral vision,